for America and what it all stands for. Take a knee for America and what we all stand for.
Hello, world. Welcome. Today we have a special show for you. This is my Oscar Week special. We have Danny Glover here. We have Grace and Bailey Jeremie. Okay. Mr. Glover, how are you?
I'm good, you know. It's cold in New York. But it's raining in San Francisco.
Where'd you go? Oh, you in San Francisco?
That's my home.
How is it? Warm there?
No, it was raining. It's rained for 30, so I had rain maybe for 36 hours. I think it stopped today. It's supposed to rain tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
Everything's wet.
And Danny Glover, since I've been telling people you were coming on my show, people been telling you, I like to know about your revolutionary past.
Wow.
Well, just a little bit about it.
Right.
Some of the things you've done, because I know where I met you with Sophia.
Elijah, and the Alliance of Families for Justice.
Yes, and I found out so much. I didn't know about Sophia's past. That was amazing when I found out. And I wondered why I liked her so much.
Oh, yeah, she's extraordinary.
Yes,
She's a great lawyer on the side of the people for justice. And I'm a member of, in fact, I'm chair of the board of the Alliance of Families for Justice.
Yes, I know.
The organization that she founded to focus on the needs of families whose loved ones are incarcerated. And another way of looking at the justice system, the criminal justice system, is through families and the impact that it has on families. When someone is incarcerated, it just not only affects them, it affects a range of members of an extended family, you know, mothers, fathers, you know, uncles, children, daughters, sons, etc. So
yes, it does.
It is that what are the needs and how do we meet their particular needs as well, you know, like the right to visit and the right to not have to ride 2 days to go visit and spend a whole bunch of money. There are different things that happen in this whole process, you know, because the more that men and women who are incarcerated are able to maintain contact with their loved ones, the more healthy their relationship is, their relationship with them.
And you know, also, Mr. Glover, on that point, that's why I'm also glad that I've met Miss Bellamy here. Miss Jamie Bellamy.
Bailey.
Bailey
Jeremie.
I never get that right. I always saying it backwards and stuff like that. This is her stuff. She's a therapist. She's a family therapist. And she's also wants to help our people, you know, get their minds right.
Yeah, we were just speaking about that earlier, you and I, James, just about how important it is to address families affected by mass incarceration holistically, especially like when that person is released, making sure that everyone is taken care of, like their wellness and like psychologically, because sometimes you can leave your home and you expect to return the exact way that it was. But if it's a decade.
Tell us that story you was telling me about the male coming home after doing some time.
Yeah, so I was just saying, you know, like if you leave and you have a family and your child is 4 or 5 and you do 10 years and you come back and you want to still enter into that situation as if I'm the dad and I'm doing this, like a 2-family home would operate like completely different. And even the mom, like if for some reason the mom's still available after 10 years, things are going to change because she had to learn how to function completely different as a single parent.
Exactly.
And so we were just talking about the importance of healing circles once people are out, and how that could help with making sure that the families are restored and their functioning is restored as well.
Yeah. You know, I had the opportunity to spend some time over the last 25 years with groups who work in the prison industrial system itself. Outside, they're outsiders, you know, whether it's counseling. And a great friend of mine is like my brother. We've known each other over 50 years. He and his sister have what they call a circle of men who are about to be reintroduced into the world, you know. And in that conversation, it's very interesting. The conversation is I've sat in their circle sometimes and talk about some of the things, some of their aspirations, some of their, you know, fears or things that come to light at that point in time. So I think there's so many. I visited Soledad Prison. Soledad Prison is famous for what happened with George Jackson and the thing around Angela Davis and everything else, you know. And I visited there, and Nani Alejandra, who is like my little brother. We've known each other since we were part of a group that was trying to maintain the peace between the Bloods and Crips after the Rodney King incident in '92. And he has this group. He goes around to about at least 5 or 6 states institutions, you know, Soledad, Tracy, Vacaville, San Quentin, and they're basically talking and sustaining a relationship that those who are incarcerated have to the community, you know. And I was there just the Tuesday before Christmas with him in Soledad. And the time that I'd come, because the third time that I've been to Soledad Prison, the third time, and the first time, there was a circle of life. So you had these lifers, men who were lifers, who were instructing young men or men who were about to be re-entered into the world.
Really? That's very interesting.
It's called a circle of life. And I thought it was so poignant and so wonderful as these men open up their hearts and open up with their story, because the stories are the ones that connect you.
You know something, Mr. Glover? When I first got into this, I wanted to, because I was with a lot of organizations that want to close prisons and things like that. When I first met Sophia, she was at the Correction Association.
Oh, yes, right.
Right. And that's where I first met her. And I met her after graduating from Riverside Coming Home program, because I have a criminal history and background. You wouldn't know it by looking at me, but but anyway.
I can tell, but that's all right.
But I always wanted to go back to prison to give lectures, to talk to people, because if you don't change the mindset, closing the prison is not going to do any good. You know what I'm saying? So I always wanted to go back and talk to them and like get them to free their mind. That was my first mission. And then I wind up getting a show and everything like that. But I always wanted to, I said I'm going roundabout way and I'm going to work my way back. And you know, because I want to do that. That's very important. You gotta help the brothers to change their mind.
I remember in the early 70s, there was this whole discussion about maintaining some contact with men who were incarcerated. It was early in the 70s, and I remember that period of time. So there was a great deal of talk about that, you know, and a kind of movement that was developing around that, you know. I remember a group that my wife at the time was involved in, called Sisters of Motivations. And so they would write to brothers who were incarcerated. In fact, there were a couple of paintings around my house who were from men who were incarcerated, and we'd have they would have an art sale for their work or some of the things they made. All these things made them feel as if they were a part of a community. And this, I'm talking about 45 years ago. You know.
Do you remember the glass things they used to do? The glass kind of paintings that I used to see when I was little and I used to think those were so beautiful. You don't see it anymore. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I mean, I've been in some places. In fact, the one time I was in Tracy, and I met a man who was building a guitar. you know, building guitars, you know, and actually had musical inclinations and everything, was building a guitar. So there different ways, you know. But I think one of the things that we have to talk about is how do we reframe this discussion about incarceration, mass incarceration. We've all read Michelle Alexander's, you know, amazing book, where she breaks down American history around systems of control after the Bacon Rebellion, after the emancipation of slavery, Jim Crow, and which led to the Civil Rights Movement. And this is, we're talking Black History Month, and this is the way we should look at history in the sense of the movements that happened, you know. Too much that we can talk about individuals and not with movements that happen. Very few people know, and this is a lot of people that reconstructive period from 1865 to 1877 was one moment where there was democracy, real democracy in the South. Those former slaves, they institute public education, not only for former slaves, but for poor whites as well.
Yep.
They instituted laws around women's rights as well. You know, these former slaves had that much insight after all their historic pain and everything else to kind of bring about another system. But that the system was easily undermined because there was no intention to have real democracy in the South. You know,
and then came the Jim Crow things that was subverting what we were trying to accomplish and throwing like speed bumps up, hurdles.
Yeah, I mean, well, the Jim Crow was basically you said, look at the movement. The question became after the Civil War, what do you do with 4 million people who've been, the majority of them had been tied to the land, and by a form of labor which had made this country within a short period of time the wealthiest country economically in the world. So that's the real one. So you come to the end of the 19th century, and toward the end of the 19th century, and you have all these dynamics. You have something called industrialization. This happened. The second part of industrialization, and the appropriation of land and the extraction industry, first oil and other iron right at the Civil War. Places like Alabama, Mobile, Alabama, and U.S. Steel collaborated with each other in terms of extracting iron ore and stuff like that. All these new industries has led to fossil fuel, et cetera, et cetera. You have this extraordinary explosion in advancement and everything else. And who's left out of it? The former slaves are left out of this whole whole process. And the system of segregation that lasted until the Civil Rights Movement. It was the Civil Rights Movement that after World War II, which had been going on all through the 20th century, the Niagara Conference with Ida B. Wells, the great editor and newspaper owner, who led an anti-lynching campaign in 1896, the year of Plessy versus Ferguson, when the Supreme Court decided separate was equal. You know, she was in that. So you had all these people who come in there and pushing forward in the 20th century. As the 20th century prose came about, and so these systems of control that Michelle Alexander talks about, and that Blackman talks about in his book Slavery by Another Name, these systems of control, in this sense, shaped the kind of culture and shaped the life for African Americans until just at the outset of World War II. You know, Roosevelt signs the Declaration in 1943, saying that bringing black people to the workforce. You know, the New Deal had really excluded black people, black women primarily, but black people because it didn't cover those people who were house servants or maids and everything. The New Deal didn't initially cover that. You know, we talk about the New Deal in its radical position, but later on, it took on that. So all these dynamics put us through the 20th century, and certainly mass incarceration.
Mr. Glover, I want to take this time out. I want to introduce.
I'm sorry. I'm in shout talking to my mother. I hope you cut this up. Don't have me shouting, talking all the time. Have
That's why I'm cutting it up right now. I'm cutting it up right now. First thing, I want to introduce you to Grace, because I think Grace has done something that's very interesting. Tell.
And this is the Braille version here, right?
So
okay. So I'm a mom of a visually impaired child, the child you met earlier.
Right here. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, that's my son.
Beautiful.
And he has given me. He really blessed my life. He changed the trajectory of my life, and he made me become an advocate for blind and visually impaired children. Okay. So I had an epiphany actually, and I saw patches for clothing in Braille. So I actually created patches to put onto clothing to help them get dressed more efficiently. So Wani has been dressing himself since he was 6 years old, and he's 11 years old now. The patches are written left and right for the foot, for the shoes, for the inner tongue of the shoe. So it's that adhesive, you just put it right onto the shoe, and they can read it and put it on properly. And then I had patches, back patches that say back in Braille, and they're actually raised to be felt. So you can feel it and read it and apply it onto the to your, to put it onto your clothes. And then I realized I had a logo, which are my 3 blind mice. But then I had someone tell me, you need to do something with the mice. You need to do something with them. They're really cool characters. So I decided to actually write a book, because blind children do not have any characters to look up to on TV. They don't have anything to look up to in children's books. They don't have any characters. So I created the characters and I brought them to life. And these characters are very positive. They're happy, and they're overcoming their special need in a visual world. When I was pregnant, I was learning sign language. I was telling everyone, so I'm learning sign language from my dad, who was deaf. And I fell in love with Helen Keller, unbeknownst to me that I would have a visually impaired child. But I fell in love with her, and I wanted to kind of pay homage to her. So the girl character, her name is Kelly Keller, and they all just very, very positive, which is something that I don't see in the community, in the visually impaired blind
There's limited
community.
representation.
Very limited representation. We were just talking about Barnes and Nobles. They don't have a section. My son can't go to Barnes and Noble and read a book. He cannot sit there and read a book. There is no books in Braille. There's only one that I know of a bookstore that's a Braille bookstore, but there's only one.
That you found in New York?
In Haskell, yeah, it's on the west side. Yeah, and I want my son to be able to go to places and be able to pick a book out like every other child and read like every other child. Yeah.
Important.
And we're in 2019 and it's still not happening.
This whole thing about community, and I will go on. This whole thing about community. My mother was born in a little small town in Jefferson County, Louisville, Georgia. Her mother was a midwife. I've said before many times that one of her part of my moral underpinning was, she said, I'm eternally grateful for my mother and father because I didn't pick cotton in September. I went to school in September. My mother was born in 1920. And so if kids pick cotton, with cotton picking, they go to school. Right. Consequently, he graduated from college in 1942, Payne College, small college. But then that community is interesting because I'm going down to that community. I'm going down there Saturday. I go down there all the time. I've gone down there since I was 6 months old. I was born in San Francisco. I was going down to Georgia since I was 6 months old. And I go down there. If I get near Atlanta, I'll drive out to the farm, drive out to the community. My mother has a first cousin. I'm going to say her name. She was born utterly able. I'm using the word.
Right.
because of her mental incapacity, she could never take care of herself. Somebody had to take care of herself. She was born in 1917. You know when she died? Last year.
What?
So you say, what kind of community? And no, I'm going to talk about. They didn't read books on taking care of. They didn't have a library in which they say what kind of community is able to bridge and create a space for this person, this human being. Every time I would see her, I would say, "How you doing?" All of that, more than 100 years.
Wow.
There's a bunch of love there.
That's
When you're talking about the beloved community, Dr. King talking about the beloved community, there's love there. There's cooperation there.
Right.
You know?
Holistic support.
And that's what made them say, they're poor people. Most of them, a lot of them were, if they get to some age right here, past 70, 80 years old, at one point in time they pick cotton. I mean, they just got displaced by the cotton picking machine in 1944. I mean, that's evidence. 100% of the cotton was picked by hand in 1944. By 1970, almost 100% of the cotton was picked by machine. I mean, all these people came irrelevant.
Right.
But I said that I'm walking around and I see this woman. I said, what kind of community is that? What aspects of community development, human development, did we need to take and translate? Of course they have issues. It's the poorest county, and one of the poorest counties in Georgia. There's no jobs. What do you do with young people and all that? But it's those cities what's come. But I'm gonna leave that alone. But I'm mummy. She died last year before, just a couple months before her 101st birthday.
Wow. That is
Way to think about that. Cities, in some sense, dislodges us from who we possibly can be.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Cities are very big because there's no which come. You're connected to the
Impersonal.
land.
Yeah.
And they did that.
In our process of evaluating supports and therapy, in the city, like, we ask all of these questions just to see what supports people have, and people will say no one about the most simplest thing, like, who do you call to talk to for emotional support? No one. Who could you call to get a ride? No one. And it sometimes it just hurts hearing that because you just see the lack of cohesiveness.
I'm telling you,
in our communities.
This business I started, I'm still alone in this business. I'm still alone. The
Not
blind
alone anymore.
Amen. And the
Can't wait
blind,
to have you on the podcast.
I know, the blind and visually impaired, they have actually kind of, and that's the thing, it's about money at times. Because if I don't have money to offer, they're not there to help. And this is the first time I'm actually publicly saying this, that when they saw my mice, they already said the different chapters. I don't want to say the organization, but this particular organization, which is a really big organization for blind and visually impaired people, the Connecticut chapter, the New Jersey chapter, and the New York chapter had all agreed not to support this because of the mice. I said, did you read my disclaimer? You can go on my website. You can look in the book. I have a disclaimer that I reclaimed these mice. I reclaimed them to make them positive characters. And this is why I want to just bring them out differently than what it has been portrayed as. Well, no, that doesn't matter. We don't want to. And I was just in complete shock. But I said, they'll catch up. They'll catch up. And the organizations of what I see, they're very antiquated. It's much older people there. Because out of all this time, you're telling me there's no Braille out there? There's no Braille in supermarkets. There's no Braille anywhere but in the lower parts of bathrooms and exits, things that's really needed for them. But besides that, they are not in those stores. I cannot send my son. My son is prepared, but the world is not ready for my son.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's the deal.
Exactly.
We talk about community. My entire family has embraced this child. You could sit and have a conversation with him, and he is equipped. He's ready. But put him out there in that world, and we'll see how could he navigate? How could he get there?
And the world, in its setup, it diminishes him
Exactly.
as handicapped.
His handicap. He's
And
special.
all of a sudden,
The moment you see him with his cane, people kind of, and I remember sobbing to my brother when he first started using his cane, and I called him. I said, "My God, it's so hard." Because when we walk out on the streets, they look at him. Some people grab their chest. Some people say, "Oh, I'm sorry." He can hear you. And he's not sorry. Believe you me. He's better than you and I. Believe me. But at the sight of it, there's a sympathy, there's this diminishing of his character until you have a conversation with him. Until you say, "Oh, how are you?" And he'll just articulate. He speaks different languages. Pleasantries only for now. But he speaks numbers and Arabic, and he's so, and this is a self-taught, he's self-taught himself, but it's because we've pushed him. We have gotten him to such a great place. But I can't take him to a supermarket and say, go get some cereal, go get milk, because nothing is labeled for him in 2019. It makes no sense.
Danny, I was looking for you on the Oscar show. I ain't see you. Where were you?
On the Oscar show,
Yeah.
I did the red carpet, which is 2 hours standing on my feet.
Oh,
in a
God.
room.
But did you get anything?
No, I had a film that we produced that was nominated, Best Documentary.
Well,
Awesome.
Danny.
Hail Connie, this evening.
In honor of my show, Now We Rise, Quest of Self-Determination, and the people of New York, and my viewers, and all my guests, you are our Oscar winner, Best Actor.
Thank you.
And you can put that on your mantle and keep that in memory of me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's all in the heart. All right, thank you.
Take a knee.